Guys, I think we'll get started. I may be a little bit ahead of schedule, which is highly unusual for me. Amen. I think something I missed earlier, most of us are aware, we're one short. I think this is all I got. Yeah, that's all I got. We're one short tonight, and just want to make mention, I think everybody knows that Mr. Jerry is not with us anymore. We lost him in an accident earlier this month, and I just want you to keep the family in your prayers, and remember, he was one of us, in and out of here all the time for several years. Mr. Jerry Bales, if you question that. Want to talk a little bit about comparisons. I really don't have much of a joke tonight, but Mr. Green, he's always ready. And I spent a little time with him before dinner, and he asked me the question about why is a nose not 12 inches? Anybody know? It'd be a foot. There it is. So Timmy and Mr. Green know the answer to everything. I do have a little short story that I'm going to use throughout tonight, but it appears two gentlemen were talking one day. One gentleman asked the other, he said, "Do you know the two greatest problems we have in our country today?" The other gentleman replied, "I don't know, and I don't care." The first gentleman said, "You know what, I think you're right." You let that one sink in a little while and see what you think. Because I bet that's a big problem today. People don't know and they don't care. And if you want to know the problem with your city or your family or your school or your church, most people don't know and most people really don't care. And I think as long as you don't care, you won't care to know. But what I'm going to talk about tonight will be something I hope that will open our eyes a little bit as usual. I've never been much of a speaker. Maybe getting a little bit better, but I've still got a long ways to go. But I try to open my eyes, and it helps me quite a bit to study. Wesley knew what he was doing when he put this on me several years ago. It's making me read and study and understand more. And as my eyes get open, I try to share with other people because I don't think I'm that far off center. I think a lot of other people see the same thing I see. But I never really thought much about the comparison thing, but we'll get into that just a little bit. But I think knowing, you got to care, but if you don't know, you can't care. So I think knowing is the first thing we've got to understand. Through fellowship like we got here tonight, we can learn from each other. Knowing without caring won't do a bit of good. The Bible says faith without works is dead. I think knowing without caring will never change a thing. You can know all you want to, but if you don't care if it's a problem, it's just going to remain the same. Again, we're going to talk about comparisons, and I'll try to go on both sides of it in just a little bit, but it's very common. There's not a day goes by that we don't compare in our business, for sure, but probably in other aspects as well. But it's very common. Every day I get an email from GM, from the rep. There's about 16 or 18 dealers in the central part of North Carolina that they compare all our numbers to. Now, I mean not just total sales, but they compare Yukons, Terrains, Cadias, every line of, they sell even Buicks, which I don't have. They compare all of it, and we're all compared together, and I'm competing in that group with Raleigh and Greensboro and Cary and Greenville, and me and poor old Clinton down there is the littlest ones in the crowd, but we still are on the list, and we have to compare ourselves to those bigger guys. It's important to know where you're at. I think comparisons are very important. We compare this year to last year. We compare this month to last month. We compare last year this month to this year this month. Every way we can break something down to see if we're tracking or moving in the right direction is important. Sports teams compare. They look at their records. Was it better than last year? Yards if it's football, points if it's basketball. They're all looking at comparisons. Churches the same way. They compare attendance this year over last year, this month over last month. Offerings are the greater. How many baptizings have we had this year? How many new members? We keep those records, and they're important to know if our church is on the right track. Jerry Clower once said, "Where will you be when you get where you're going?" I don't think if we did no comparison, we would know if we're even moving toward that target. So there are places where the comparisons are necessary, and we need to be aware of that. So if they're good, what's wrong with them? If I hadn't found something wrong with them, I wouldn't be talking about them tonight, because that's what I talk about, is things that I found problems with or something wrong with it. I got a little side note here. I said, I guess if you compared me to 10 other speakers, I'd find more troubles than the other 10. That's kind of a joke. But as long as you compare yourself to yourself, I don't think anybody can get hurt. It's when you compare yourself to somebody else that the problems start popping up. And here's what I found to be the problem. One thing or another, comparison is either going to lead to superiority or inferiority. Inferiority will lead to insecurity, probably, and superiority can lead to pride. Never have I read anything about the Bible where I found pride was a good aspect or a good feature. So I think we've got to guard against both of those. If you compare to yourself, you can only help or hurt yourself. When you compare to others, it's when you start the inferiority and superiority problem. Either way, somebody's going to come out ahead of the other, and that's where it turns into a problem. It can be superior again. You can turn into pride, which is not a good thing. Inferior can lead to depression, maybe anger toward the others that you were compared to, maybe even anger toward God. You might have people say, God, why don't you bless me like you bless them? Why don't you love me as much as you love them? Why is my business not doing good? Why is my family not doing good? The inferior side of it is a little scary. In those reports that I was telling you about, again, I'm compared to guys a lot bigger than I am. Now, obviously my numbers are smaller because my store is smaller, my population is smaller. I could let that get in my head and drive me into a state of depression and say, well, I can't compete, I ain't gonna try. But I've looked at it, and I can't compete in Yukons and Acadias, the utilities, the high-end pickups, the Denali's and things. But I'm in a rural market, in a construction market, and I can compete with those guys. And I grew up a farmer, so I can talk to the farmers, and I can talk to the construction people. I can communicate with them. And I beat their tail just about every month in heavy-duty pickup sales. And when it comes to fleet stuff, I probably beat Hendrick and Thompson, the Raleigh, Carey, all of them, because I focused on something there. I know I'm going to get beat, but I'm not going to let that drag me down to depression. I'm going to find something that I can win at, and I'm going to focus on it and move forward. Well, look in John's Gospel, chapter 21 is a pretty popular chapter. I'll remind you, that's where Jesus was on the sand cooking breakfast for the disciples. They were in the boat not catching anything, but this was after the resurrection. This will be the third time that he had presented himself to the disciples after the resurrection. He wanted to be sure Peter knew Peter loved him. He asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? He said, yes, Lord. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. 3 times. I think he was covering the 3 denials that Peter had shared earlier. He had denied Jesus 3 times. So I think the key there, 3 denials, he needed 3 I love yous to cover those so he would know. Jesus knows everything. Jesus knew that Peter loved him. He wanted Peter to know that Peter loved him. He just wanted him to feel confident. Peter was going to be the new church, the rock. He had named him the foundation of the new church. He had denied him 3 times, so he needed to cover those denials to feel confident that he could be counted on. But just past that, this is right after that, I'm going to try to read about 3 or 4 verses here, didn't bring glasses, so bear with me. John 21 verse 18 says, "Most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." Then Peter turned around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper table, and said, "Lord, who is the one who betrayeth you?" Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, "But Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If I will that he remain until I come again, what is that to you? You follow me." See what's going on there? Jesus is telling Peter, Jesus knows all, your death is coming. They're going to crucify you just like they did me. Now, Peter was the only disciple that followed him when they arrested him, but Peter followed at a distance. This was when he denied him. Now he's telling Peter, you're going to go through a very tragic and horrible death, but you follow me. Follow me, not at a distance this time. You follow me all the way to the cross. Peter understood that, but he looked at John and he said, "What about him? Why ain't that cat going to death too? I mean, he's a disciple just like me. What's up with that with John?" See, Peter's comparing himself. Jesus said, if it will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? What he's saying, if John is condemned as well, is it going to lessen your worry? Is it going to lessen your pain? Is it going to lessen the importance of your martyr? Will it change anything whatsoever if he goes too? This is you. I'm telling you your future here. So that comparison there is wrong. If I compare my business with Mr. Hendrick, I can't beat Mr. Hendrick in nothing. I don't know how many stores he's got, 30, 40, or 50. So I don't do that. I don't put myself in that position. If 2 pastors are having lunch together, they're obviously going to talk about the churches. One of them's church is going to be doing better than the other one. That's a fact. That's back to that inferiority and superiority. One of them's going to be prideful. The other one's going to feel down and discouraged. Again, they might say, "God, why ain't you blessing my church? What am I doing wrong?" It's a necessity, but you've got to be really careful with this comparison here. John 3:16, but this is James 3:16. It's pretty cool how some of those verses run together, so it helps me remember them. But James 3:16 says, "For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there." Confusion and every evil thing are there. Now, I think the envy and confusion, that inferiority thing, will draw envy. You say, "He's got more than me. I want what he's got." That's envy. I want that. Where envy exists, evil things are born. I got to thinking, when businesses fail, is there confusion? That's what James 3:16 says, where evil and self-existing exist, confusion and every evil thing are. When business fail, confusion. When families split, there's confusion. When churches fail, there's confusion. Confusion and every evil thing are there. It all begins when we start comparing, and somebody's greater than the other, and envy steps in because that inferior one wants what the superior one has, and it drives them into that state of inferiority. The positive side of that is the pride thing that we've talked about. I'll get a little deeper in that in just a minute. Alex and I were talking about this earlier this week, and he threw another verse on me. 2 Corinthians 10:12. For we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. That's comparing me to me and making it something that is not wise. Yesterday, Wesley talked about Satan, Lucifer, how he was in heaven with God initially, and how he just went into great detail of how perfect he was and how God had made him one of the three superior angels, and how he was beautiful and great figure and a great voice, and he led the worship. But he began to compare himself to God. And when he did that, he got kicked out of heaven. And he didn't learn a lesson by it, because when he got on earth, he had gotten Eve off to herself, and he had Eve comparing herself to God. He said, if you eat of the fruit, you will be like God. But reality is Eve was already like God. She was made in God's image. That was a lie from Satan, from the devil. But all about comparison. And it was put there to make them sin. So they compared themselves to God. They wanted to be like God. And without the comparison, they would never know. The last thing I'll tell you about real quick is some of the stuff we compare ourselves to today, the bar has been lowered so bad. I mean, it's terrible. The kids in school, Glenn and I stopped and got a biscuit coming in Sunday morning for church, and the cashier behind the register had to be 35, 40 years old, couldn't make change. It was, not a chance. But that's okay today. We've got a calculator, computer, this thing here, and we have lowered that bar. And if we're going to compare ourselves to a bar that has been lowered, it's just going to get lower and lower and lower. Because we're going one way or another find a way to succeed. If I always said this about GM, I said if at first you don't succeed, you lower your goals. That's not a good business plan, but they do that quite often. I have seen it, and yeah, we've years and years ago I was an Oldsmobile dealer, and we sold 1 million Cutlass Supremes in the late 80s. One car line, 1 million. And I remember when Buick completely across the line got to 300,000, they invited everybody to Las Vegas and had one big party with all the Buick dealers because they had made it to 300,000. That's what I'm talking about. You can't compare to that bar being lowered that bad. So, to wrap it up, I said earlier, you say, I don't know and I don't care. I tell you tonight, you might know, and I hope you'll care. Because my eyes have been opened to some of this, and I hope what I tell you is just something that you say, well, yeah, he don't know how to say it, but I understand what he's trying to say, and it makes sense. But just try to be aware when things like that happen that you can pay attention and not fall into either pride or inferiority. But thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the attendance, and we'll do it again in about 30 days. I don't have the date. Can get it pretty quick. Anybody needs a card, we got these cards. I've got them in the briefcase, but didn't put them out tonight. But September 29, my producer, Mr. Glenn. And I'll add, Glenn drives 2 hours here to do this every Monday night, drives 2 hours on Sunday to go to church here, and then he's got to drive 2 hours back home. Sometimes he's got to ride with me like tonight, double glutton for punishment. But Mark came in yesterday, set up, helps with tea. Seth, the boys, they all help. And it takes all of it because, man, today I got here late. And Arnold was here, and Ronnie was here, and Clay came in, and the preacher. Couldn't do it without them. Just want to say thank you for all of them. And if you will, remember Jerry's family in prayer. Anything else you want to mention, and we'll close out.